Hey there, I'm Edgar Wright and I'm here today to talk to you about my first ever documentary, The Sparks Brothers. So I wanted to make a film about the band Sparks and the brothers Ron and Russell Mael because I felt that they were the greatest and most influential band that had never had a documentary made about them. I've always felt that they as a band were ahead of the curve, and it's quite extraordinary to look back at their 50-year history and see that they were early adopters of pretty much every genre going. I'd started saying aloud to my friends, the only thing stopping this band from being as big as they should be is some kind of overview to tackle this somewhat daunting discography in a film. And I really feel if there's somebody who could just make a film about Sparks, then they'd be able to get the credit they deserve whilst they're still around to enjoy it. What I wanted to do is show you some of my favourite Sparks songs of all time. This is Sparks' single, This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us from 1974. I was born in 1974, so I'm not fortunate enough to remember this coming out at the time, but it's definitely a song that kept coming back into my consciousness when I was a teenager because I used to listen to a lot of like Queen and David Bowie and Roxy music, and then frequently this song would crop up on compilations. And I'm sure like a lot of people hearing it for the first time, you would lean closer and saying, wait, what is that? Who's singing? Is that a man or a woman? It's a very androgynous vocal. Now the interesting thing about this song is that it was a smash hit for Sparks. Their biggest hit at the time. It got to number 2 in the UK and was held off the top spot by a song called Sugar Baby Love by the Rubettes, which I don't think Sparks have ever recovered from the fact that they were number 2 and not number 1. So another thing about Sparks is that their lyrics on paper seem indecipherable and they're like a code to crack. And This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us, especially with Russell's vocal style, you often left wondering, what is this song actually about? And then as you start to read the lyrics, it would seem to be that each verse is like a short film in itself, talking about a young man who's so anxious to get a date with a girl that his anxiety is flowering into these movie type situations of like a plane crash or a bomb going off or being attacked by cannibals. And really what the idea of This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us is there's too many men and not enough women in the town, and somebody's going to have to pay. So these two guys are going to have a spaghetti western face-off in order to get a date with a girl. A lot of Sparks songs are about not getting the girl, which is one of the reasons that I love them.
Thank you so much. Here we go.
This is Sparks' single Amateur Hour from 1974, but this clip is from a 1975 concert they had at the Fairfield Halls in Croydon, and this was recorded for TV. I particularly love this clip because you can see Sparks' mania at its most insane, with teenage girls storming the very low stage. It seems very easy, as you can see in this clip, very easy for the stage invaders to get on stage. Russell and Ron barely make it through the song without being besieged by teenage girls. And I find this clip endlessly fun because it's just funny watching Russell Mael in his orange jumpsuit try to get through their hit single without being rugby tackled to the ground by a bunch of teenage girls. And what's interesting is the roadie who is pulling the teenage girls off is Richard Coble, who is now one of the top tour managers in the world, and in fact is the Rolling Stones tour manager. And this kind of tour for Sparks was the first time he was ever a roadie, and he's now gone on to be one of the biggest tour managers on the planet, working for Madonna and Laird and now the Rolling Stones. I mean, I find this clip absolutely hilarious because Ron Mael is just sitting in the middle, no pun intended, in the middle of the maelstrom of stage invaders. It seemed like sort of very lax security for this gig, but an amazing clip nonetheless. This is Beat the Clock by Sparks from 1979, and this is where I come in because I heard this song when I was like 5 years old, and it was the start of my obsession with Sparks. Some of the lyrics still amuse me, even though I didn't understand them when I was 5. I knew that I wanted to understand them. I sometimes equate Sparks to when I used to listen to Monty Python albums when I was a teenager, as I didn't entirely understand it all, but I wanted to. It made me want to be smarter. And here's one verse that I like. It's from the album that they made with Giorgio Moroder, which is one of the first electro-pop albums ever. And back in 1979, it was quite unusual for a rock band to ditch the guitars and go all synthesizers. Obviously, like through the 80s, that became kind of de rigueur for a lot of bands, but Sparks were one of the first to do it. And this song was written on the piano by Ron Mael to sound a bit like a Velvet Underground song. And then Giorgio Moroder turned it into essentially a dance track, and it was one of their biggest hits. It was a top 10 hit in 1979. The video I find particularly great, and it is that thing like what Ron and Russell are wearing seems like it could be from 1979 or 2008 or now. It's like the classic hipster outfits. I just think they're sort of, like a lot of times in their career, they're way ahead of the curve. Quite an unusual thing then to be doing the sound of the 80s in the 70s.
No use in lecturing them or in threatening them. They will just say, who are you? Is that a question or not? And you see that the plot is predictable, not new, but just a stunt at the things you will do.
This is When Do I Get to Sing My Way by Sparks from 1994. Sparks had been relatively successful in the States in the 80s, but in the UK, Sparks had been pretty absent since the late 70s and then came back with this single in Europe in the mid-90s. And I, who had been following Sparks as best I could in a pre-internet age, was dumbfounded to see this video on TV of Sparks, who in my head I hadn't seen for 15 years. And it was like, wait, they're back and they have a new single? And they look amazing? What's going on? I don't understand. This is the same band that did Beat the Clock? I'm very, very confused.
So when do I get to do it my way? When do I get to feel like selfish yourself? When do I get to sing my way in heaven or hell?
The song itself is fantastic and one of Sparks' best songs, and I think also their best video, directed by Sophie Muller. It also features Christy Hayden, who is Sparks' drummer at this point. Now, the song was like their comeback in the UK, but also gave them a period of massive success in Germany, where it was one of, I think it was the most played song that year on the radio in Germany. The other thing that's interesting about this song is that Sparks kind of returned to Europe at a time when both the Pet Shop Boys and Erasure were ruling the charts. And a lot of people would say that the Pet Shop Boys and Erasure owe a lot to Sparks, and so I think it was a bit kind of galling for Sparks to return, and some people who didn't understand their history saying, oh, it sounds a bit like the Pet Shop Boys, when in reality it's the other way around.
When do I get to sing my way in heaven or hell?
This is Dick Around by Sparks from 2006. This is from their album Hello Young Lovers, and came out of a period where Sparks tore up the rulebook and started again, finding a style that was just totally them and making the music that they wanted to make without worrying about what might be played on the radio or not. And in fact, Dick Around, not surprisingly, got banned by the BBC, which apparently was a shock to Sparks, but I'm not surprised that you couldn't play a song called Dick Around on The Breakfast Show on the BBC. But it's an extraordinary piece of work, and this is a period where Sparks are now just producing their own music at Russell's house. You know, one of the most amazing things about all of Sparks' work in the 21st century is that it's self-produced, and in fact Russell is the engineer. So a lot of the time it's just the two of them making these insane operatic tracks. Dick Around is like 6 minutes of operatic brilliance. I always think as well that there's a lot of autobiography in Sparks songs, and there's one particular lyric that always stands out to me in this one, especially if the idea is that Sparks haven't been given their due.
Why the hell, why the hell, why the hell, why the hell, why the hell did she desert you when you were so influential? Why the hell, why the hell, why the hell, why the hell, why did she desert you when you told her she was so essential?
This is Edith Piaf Said It Better Than Me by Sparks from their 2017 album Hippopotamus. Now this has got an amazing video, this song, by Joseph Wallace, the animator, who actually does some of the animation in my documentary, The Sparks Brothers. I think that this whole stop motion animation video was done in 6 weeks, which is actually not a lot of time for stop motion animation. The song itself is a Sparks classic that really fits into their brand of making these wild operatic epics about things that are not very rock and roll. And this song is about the narrator has led a boring life and can't sing like the Edith Piaf classic Je ne regrette rien, because he has no regrets about anything he's done because he hasn't done anything that exciting. So I love that it's like a really big song about having had a boring life, and the end refrain is like like they're already too old and they've already lived too slow. And so to make this massive epic song about being boring, I think is very quintessentially Sparks.
Will change. Edith Piaf said it better than me. Je ne regrette rien. Pretty song but not intended for me. Time to put some music on. Edith Piaf said it better. Historically, we make an appeal to something greater than we are when we need to heal.
This is What the Hell Is It This Time from Sparks' 2017 album Hippopotamus. I picked this song because I really like the video, and I think it also speaks to something about Sparks that I think is quite profound for a band that's in its 5th decade. Ron and Russell have just found a way of presenting themselves that never ages, or you never tire of seeing them. A lot of bands who are maybe in their 5th decade of being musicians, maybe they don't appear in their videos anymore because there's something a bit pathetic about being a rocker in your 70s. But Sparks don't have this problem because they've always been so stylish and stylized, and they've never been tried to be like the sexy rock gods. I mean, Ron Mael himself has been dressing like he was in his 50s since he was in his 20s. So that's a great kind of gimmick to have. It's like Kiss with their makeup. Ron Mael is just ageless. The two of them together are such an iconic duo. You'll follow them anywhere. And I love that about them, is that they don't have to pretend to be anybody else but Sparks. And I think there's something really profound about that, and I love them for that. I hope you've enjoyed me talking about some of my favourite Sparks songs, and I do hope you'll check out my first ever music documentary, The Sparks Brothers, when it hits theatres June 18th.